You need to know what to do with that dough. Let the chef show you. You need to know what to do with that dough.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Need to Know Pod. I'm your host, Chef Sahira, and in today's episode, we are talking preparation. In the culinary world, we say mise en place, and that is simply everything in its place. So let's break this down. What is mise en place and why it's so important, and how it can affect your outcome when it comes to baking. So let's get into it. So what is mise en place? Mise en place is simply preparation. It really is a French term that means everything in its place. So mise en place really is preparing and organizing ingredients and equipment before you start cooking or baking. So let's talk about what that means, preparing and organizing ingredients in your equipment before you start to cook or bake. What that means is you take a look at your recipe and decide what you will need. I tell everybody I never bake on the fly because I have to prepare. And that was one of my main takeaways from culinary school. I have to prepare. So what does that look like? That looks like me knowing what recipe I'm using, how much of each recipe, measuring out all of my ingredients, making sure if I'm using a 9-inch pan, well, I need my 9-inch pans out. I use parchment circles, so I need to make sure I have my parchment circles. I just need to make sure I have everything. So I never wake up and decide, oh, I'm going to bake. I'm going to bake a chocolate cake. Well, my chocolate cake consists of my chocolate icing. Do I have chocolate icing? If not, what do I need for my chocolate icing? My chocolate icing, I need coffee. I need chocolate ganache. Do I have the heavy cream? So just making sure that you have everything. This is why I tell all my clients or students that we never bake on the first day. We always prep our ingredients. And this is clearly my takeaway from culinary school. And this is what we did in school. So I just continue to practice preparing before I start to bake. So I went to school about 4 days out the week. I went to school full time, and we would come in one day and prep the ingredients, and we're prepping on a big scale. So we weren't just making like a serving size. We were making sheet pans of things. So we had to prep our ingredients for the next day. So the next day we would come and bake everything off. Whether you use a scale as a baker or, which I highly recommend as a pastry chef, but whether you use a scale or you use the measuring cups, I recommend that you measure out your ingredients. That's part of the preparation process. We call it scaling. All your ingredients should be scaled. Whether you need a cup of flour or 200 grams of flour, that should be set aside. And just like I said, make sure you are looking at your recipe and making sure that you have everything that you need. The worst thing to do is realize that you don't have all the ingredients that you need. Let's just say you're ready to bake a cake and you realize you need cake flour, but you only have all-purpose flour, right? So that's why I think it's important to take a look at that recipe. This is all part of the preparation process. So also, it allows you to make sure the things that need to be at room temperature are at room temperature, like your butter. Let's just say your dairy ingredients, right? Your butter should be at room temperature. Your egg should be at room temperature. Your milk or sour cream, those things need to be at room temperature. You never want to take something that's so cold and put it right into your batter because it can have an effect. And you would probably, I'm sure you would be wondering, why didn't my final product turn out so great? And it might have to do with you not using room temperature butter or sugar. Even if it doesn't say it, just know that your butter, because the creaming process where we cream our butter and sugar together, if your butter is not soft enough, that will affect your cake. It won't cream properly. And again, right, once we prepare, it reduces the chance of us leaving out an ingredient, because when you prepare, your ingredients should be lined up, right? You should know that I have my baking soda, I have my baking powder. So that's part of the preparation process. So I'll just give you an example of when I use the mise en place. First of all, I use it all the time, but how I used it on a larger scale. And that's when I prepared for my really large function at the Javits Center here in New York City for the Circle of Sisters. The event was held in October annually. It's an annual event held in October. It might have changed now, but it was held in October. But I started preparing in March, right? So why would I prepare so early? Because I had stuff to get. I had containers to get. I had ingredients to get. I had recipes to prep for. So what I do is prepare my I do have large batch recipes. So it allows me to really just take a look at what I need on a large scale. So if I'm just making, let's say, 12 cupcakes or 2 dozen cupcakes, for this event, I needed, let's say, 144 cupcakes. I do have a recipe that allows me to make 144 cupcakes. So what that looked like, I would say maybe like a month before, because I was selling a lot of things at this event. I sold cupcakes, I sold brownies. So we're talking about a lot of preparation. I sold cupcakes, brownies. I remember I did rainbow cookies. We did sugar cookies also. We did sugar cookies, rainbow cookies. I said, we sold rugula. So all of that is preparation. Rugula is dough, right? Rugula, you got to make sure your dough is prepared. We have to roll each disc once we roll it out. So rugula is time consuming. So all of that is preparation. So with that event, I have containers. So I had to make sure I measured out my uh my flour, my sugar, and I put it on my rack. And that's what we did in school. So I had to measure out my sugar and my flour, put it on a rack. The wet ingredients, of course, you can't measure it out, like your eggs, right? Or your buttermilk, specifically for, let's say, a red velvet cupcake. But what I can do when it's time to make it, now I can just dump my flour in. All my ingredients, my dry ingredients are combined already. That's just an example of preparation. So mise en place. Um, and it came in handy. It definitely came in handy, as opposed to every little thing checking it off. Oh, now I have to weigh up my flour. My flour is already measured. So now I have a container with all my dry ingredients. And actually making red velvet cupcakes are pretty easy. So it's your dry ingredients mixed with your wet ingredients. And scoop them out, right? So that was easy, but I had to prepare. If I did not prepare, if I was never introduced to this method, I don't believe that event would have been so successful, seeing that I wanted to make so much. So I had to be prepared. So one of the benefits of mise en place is that it saves you time. It definitely saves you time. As opposed to stopping and going. If you take a look at a recipe and try to go through each step as you're going through it, it takes a lot of time. So now let's take a recipe where you want to bake a cake. So now you're reading your recipe. You're starting, literally, no pun intended, from scratch. And so now you want to prep your pan. Your pan should already be prepped. Now you want to cut out the circles. One way to prepare for cakes is to already have cake circles on hand. I would say if you generally bake 9-inch cakes, have 9-inch cake circles on hand, or 7-inch, or whatever size you use, have those cake circles on hand. So for me, if I bake a cake, it's nothing for me to just pull out cake circles, spray them, and put them in a pan. So yeah, it saves you time. For my carrot cake, I grate carrots. I don't want to grate carrots while I'm measuring flour. My carrot should already be grated, measured out. I think my recipe calls for maybe like 7 ounces or something like that. Grate the carrots, put them to the side. That all that could be done a day ahead before. I'm not saying you have to prepare it the day before, but at least I would definitely say give yourself some time, because I don't want to feel overwhelmed. So just like with the carrots, if you have to chop nuts, some people put nuts in their carrot cake or nuts on the icing. So one reason I think it's important to what makes mise en place so important. So this falls under accuracy as well, the importance of accuracy. And in order for you to prepare, one of the steps in preparing is to measure out your ingredients. And this is why bakers use scales. I believe all bakers should have scales. I believe all bakers should have scales because it definitely will allow you to be more accurate, but it makes it so much easier. You can increase and decrease your recipe. It makes it faster to bake. Again, preparing for that big event that I did at the Javits Center, it allowed me to increase a recipe from 24 cupcakes to 144 cupcakes. Let's just say I needed 4 cups of something. Do the math and trying to figure out how many cups. I don't want to have to count 20 cups of flour when I can just multiply it if I measure it in weight. So the beauty about scales is we use weight and it's just so much more accurate. It's such a more accurate way to measure out our ingredients. I can measure 20 cups and you measure 20 cups and we'll have two very different numbers at the end of the day. But if the total is I'll give you an example. My what is it? My cream cheese frosting. I know offhand I need 1,300 grams of powdered sugar. I don't really know how many cups it is. I really don't care how many cups it is. What I know is I can go anywhere, and if you have a kitchen scale, all I need to do is measure out 1,300 grams of sugar. So that makes it so much easier. If I'm making a really big batch, now I need 2,600 grams, or what's after 2,600? 3,900, 26, right? And 3,900 grams, as opposed to how many cups would you have to measure out? That is part of the process. So when we use the term scale your ingredients, when you are preparing cake batters, I've been baking for so long, so I know how much batter goes in each pan. If you don't have a scale, sometimes I remember I remember when we used to make box cakes. The goal is to make sure all the batter is even in your pan. Well, if you have a scale, you can accurately measure how much batter is in each pan as opposed to just trying to eyeball it. So one cake will be thicker. And that was something that just, I take for granted that I know now, but sometimes your cake levels are uneven. Why? Because one pan probably had too much batter. People don't know how to even out a cake. So I just think having scales plays a huge part in the whole preparation, whether you use a dry measuring cups or not. I just think scales will make it so much easier if you are definitely being serious about you want to bake like a professional. That is definitely something you would need is a kitchen scale. So just back to the preparation, when you prep your ingredients, when everything is prepped and ready to go, it allows you to focus more on the technique than the process of trying to get your ingredients together. The flour's over here, the sugar's over here. Oh, now I got to chop the nuts. Let me know. Is this something that you have tried? Do you normally have everything prepared when you're ready to bake? Um, it's like I said, it's something I learned on day one, and it's something I do, and I pass that on to my clients as well. Never do I prepare, or when we show up for, actually give the trainings online, show up with your ingredients ready to go, right? Because it saves time. So if I'm teaching people how to bake, and we have, let's say, 10 people on a call, I can't take the time and wait for one person to get their ingredients together. So once we start working together for a while, I expect you to show up with your ingredients already measured. I may give you 2 or 3 times, but the third time we are ready to go. Show up with your ingredient scale because we're going to get right into it. All your ingredients should be measured out. And that's all scale is, really kind of just measuring it out. One way that you can also prepare in the whole process of preparing is to not only do we need to have our ingredients, we need to make sure we have our tools together. So I referenced the baking pans. Make sure you have your spatulas. Make sure you have your parchment paper, like I said, your whisk, your measuring spoons. All that stuff needs to be in place. Actually, what I would do with my clients is tell them of course, what ingredients we're going to use, but also what equipment you would need just to make sure you have that out. The last thing you want to do is need to measure something out and you can't find your measuring spoon, or if you're using a measuring cup, your measuring cup. So that is really important. So having not just the ingredients, but your tools as well. So let's take an example I'll give you a recipe that just to give you an example on how I would prep, let's say for our chocolate chip cookies. The way we make chocolate chip cookies is with the creaming method. And that is simply combining our butter and sugar, adding our eggs and our flavor, and then mixing in our flour as well as our chocolate chips. So the first thing we need to do is make sure our eggs are at room temperature. Right? We want to make sure our eggs are at room temperature. We want to make sure our butter is at room temperature. So the first thing we do to prepare, we're not doing this the day of, or we're not doing it an hour before. So let's just say we decide we want cookies on a Monday. Well, early that Monday, what I would do is take out my butter to let my butter come to room temperature as well as my eggs. That's number one. Measure out your sugar. We put that to the side. And you also need to know the process. So just fun fact, when you look at professional baking recipes, the ingredients are listed in order and after each step there's a line under it. So if you ever saw one of my recipes, it'll say we'll continue to use this chocolate chip cookie recipe as an example. So my recipe would say butter, sugar, whatever the ounces is, right? Then there would be a line under that. So that indicates that the butter and the sugar go together as step one. Then it would say eggs, vanilla, right? Then it would be another line under that. That indicates that the eggs and the vanilla go together, and that's step two. The next step would say flour, baking soda, and salt. Line under that. That again, that indicates that our flour and a baking soda and salt are going in the same bowl. We'll mix that. Yes, you'll get directions, but that is part of the process too. It's telling you not just putting all the dry ingredients together and now you're scrambling. When you look at professional recipes, they are in steps with a line underlining, meaning this comes first and these ingredients go together. Lastly, it would say chocolate. Um, and that would be on a line by itself, as well as if you want to add nuts or something to that recipe. So back to how we would prep. Our butter would be at room temperature. We would measure out our sugar. Our eggs would also be at room temperature. And we can take a bowl and have our flour, baking soda, and salt in one bowl. Mix that together. Measure out your chocolate chips in another bowl. Have your pan, you would use a sheet pan. I actually use an ice cream scoop to scoop out my chocolate chip cookies. So we would have the ice cream scoop ready. We would have parchment paper ready for our sheet pan. Our oven would be preheating when we're ready to, when you actually decide you're ready to bake, before you start actually putting all your ingredients together. Cut your oven on. That's just an example of us prepping, right? That's an example of mise en place. So I think it's super important to read through your recipe. Read the entire recipe before beginning to understand the timing and steps. Sometimes some recipes take a long time. I will say some recipes take a long time. So make sure you understand the recipes. Again, my recipe, or not my recipe, professional recipes, make it a little easier to understand, but also with the recipe and read the directions. Read the directions on how to put everything together. Make sure you understand. I think that plays a crucial role as well. Also, you want to arrange in the order of the recipe, right? So, like I said, you have your butter, even though we need it to be at room temperature, you set that aside. Measure out your sugar. The next step is eggs. Some recipes, professional recipes, my chocolate chip cookie recipe says 3 ounces. What does that look like? That looks like me cracking maybe an egg, 2 eggs, and measuring out 3 ounces. You have to play around with it. But again, that's when scales come into play. So, but that's just the step. Measure out your vanilla. You can mix your vanilla with your eggs. And again, like I said, your flour. If you're gonna sift the flour, sift the flour. Have the flour already sifted. You don't want to sift when you're trying to put it together. What I would do with my staff when my shop was open was, if nothing else, prepare my ingredients. that makes it easy for me to come finish one thing. Let me put it together. I don't have to necessarily scoop it, but if I see my ingredients are together, I can prepare it. Things that they couldn't prepare, the things that took a little more skill set, just prepare my ingredients. Let's put it together and I'll finish it. I can come and finish it, but at least you can give me a head start. But at least I know you measure the ingredients if you show that you can actually use a scale and measure out the ingredients. So it made it a lot easier and it made the time go by a lot faster as well. But preparation, right? Preparation is key. I think that is one of the big things. People ask me questions. People ask me questions about bacon. And a lot of it sometimes is just the whole prep work of it all. I have a girlfriend who would call me even though we speak all the time, but every holiday she would ask me about the same recipe, but she would be trying to make it um as we're on the phone, as opposed to taking the advice, right? Taking the advice and just preparing, preparing ahead of time. And a lot of times she didn't. And she would cook. I know she was definitely overwhelmed. Um, so yeah. So I just think if nothing else you take away, preparing is key. Prepare ahead of time. And if you know nothing else, you'll know that Chef Sahira never bakes on a fly. So mise en place, even though I use it in bacon, I just use it in the kitchen in general. I will say that on just with having my kids when they were smaller, every Sunday I baked, not baked, every Sunday I cooked a Sunday dinner. And it wasn't like I never woke up on Sunday like, what are we going to eat on Sunday dinner? The whole preparation, my mindset has definitely shifted when it comes to being prepared in the kitchen. Before I used to have a lot of events and would be so overwhelmed. I would be so overwhelmed trying to get everything done because just trying to do everything in one day. But once I was introduced to, it seems so simple, like, how about preparing for it? Preparing for it. So it just makes it so much easier. I actually teach my clients how to prepare, especially like for the holidays now. So actually that will be our next podcast, another episode on how to prepare for the holidays. I think that's important. But just wanted to give you just a little back, just to give you a little introduction to mise en place. So when it's time to take that preparation to the next level, you'll have a better understanding on what that looks like. So now let's talk about food safety for today. Our food safety talk. So I did on my YouTube channel, I discussed in last episode of the Need to Know pod, I discussed the recall of Boar's Head, and I also talked about the closure of the Turkey Leg Hut. As of the recording of this video, Turkey Leg Hut still has yet to open, and that is the well-known, famous restaurant in Houston, Texas. So I just did a little less than 10-minute video on my YouTube channel, and the comments were very interesting. It went from everything from it's a setup. People were out to get them. And I just want to be real clear that I just wanted to focus on the health violations. I actually not recommended, I actually requested to see the violation. So I'm waiting for that. And when that comes, I will definitely speak on their violations. I don't know how true it is, but I did see someone write that one of the violations was maybe like sticky stuff on maybe like black stuff, sticky stuff on their refrigerator and black stuff on their soda machine. Or I feel like they mentioned something about the ice machine as well. So So in my response to the people, some people felt like, like, again, oh, they're being set up. Somebody even told me I was just doing way too much talking, but I can talk. You know why I can talk about it? I can, regardless of what they went through in terms of where they spent their money. They were actually they filed for bankruptcy. So they run the risk of maybe not even being opened again. I hope that is not the case. But I don't get into all that. My concern was, and I just was reporting on the health violations. So when it comes to ice machines, I don't order drinks from fountains. I don't drink fountain soda, right? I don't drink fountain soda because what I know is people don't clean their ice machines. And if you ever has anybody ever taken a look at like kitchen what is it? Not Hell's Kitchen. Uh not Hell's Kitchen. Gordon Ramsay had a show where he went to look at people's restaurants, but also Restaurant Impossible, and that was with Robert Irvine. The kitchens were absolutely disgusting. And one thing I know is that people don't clean their ice machines. People don't clean the soda machines. So I don't drink from fountain sodas. I mean, you call it food safety. I'm not telling you that you should not. I don't get ice from people outside. Only ice I eat is ice from my house because I know people's machines aren't clean. And I really believe, again, that if your staff isn't trained or if only one person knows what food safety is, then only one person is going to care. And if it's not their business, they don't have any skin in the game. So if they come and shut your restaurant down, they'll just go get another job, right? But you who put all that blood, sweat, and tears into your business, I just think it's imperative that you are compliant, right? That you comply with the health codes, with the regulations, and that you are knowledgeable. The person said, like, "Oh, all you can talk about is food violations." Yep. And that's really all I am talking about because I actually am certified to teach food safety to not just the workers, to the managers so that they can train their staff as well. I'm actually HACCP certified, and HACCP hazard analysis critical control point. And that's just a whole nother thing. But I'm also certified for that. So I can come in and teach your staff. I can come in and give you a plan. Um, so I don't just talk about violations to talk about, oh, look who got closed down. No, I'm talking about because if you're running these big businesses, I just believe that you should know and do better, especially when you are serving food to the public. Now, if you want to serve it in your house and you got mold in your house, that's on you. But when you are dealing with the public, I just think that people should be safe when they go out to restaurants. Um, I actually next episode I'm gonna pull some just to give you an idea on what some of the violations look like here in New York City, and people are still able to operate. So you can have a rating A, B, or C. I'm just gonna look at a few. Maybe some even people who have A's have some violations, but I'm gonna tell you maybe compare A restaurants violations with the B restaurants violations with C violations, and go figure. And so yeah, so I just think that just be careful on where you eat. If the places that you eat, if your city, state has a food grade, or they recommend that or require that the restaurants in your neighborhood display their food grade, look into it. See if you can't look up what the food grade is or what was their latest health code violation, if any. Did they pass? Did they barely pass? So, and you make the determination. So that's it for our food safety. So now, my favorite part of the podcast is taking a baker's question from the listeners. So let me just pull this up really quickly. Okay, so this question comes from Shani Bowie. She writes, "I have tried every buttercream recipe in life and still can't get it right. Help, please." So what I will say is, just to give you some tips on buttercream. I like a thick butter, not a thick, a light buttercream. Buttercreams, typically your basic buttercream is powdered sugar, confectioner's sugar with uh, some butter. You put some flavor in it, and then you have your buttercream. I like to lighten it up. A good way to lighten up buttercream is with adding some liquid, like a heavy cream. As I recommend heavy cream, but depending on what you make, right? Depending on the consistency. A cream cheese frosting, you can add a little heavy cream, but the cream cheese itself is already makes for a soft uh, buttercream. My vanilla buttercream, I put my own little spin on it. So I actually mix two different kind of buttercreams. I make an Italian buttercream, which is taking some egg whites, whipping them, mixing in some hot syrup, and then adding some sugar to that, plus mixing another just basic sugar and butter recipe. So I just make my own creation, because if you just use sugar and butter, then you get a very heavy, thick, sugary um, buttercream. My chocolate buttercream, I add heavy cream. So you need some liquid. You need some kind of liquid to lighten it up. I do like a heavy cream. My peanut butter frosting, I use heavy cream. You can use milk, but just also you might have the wrong recipe. So I'm not sure why your buttercream is what kind you're making, but what I would say, even if you just made a basic vanilla, use some butter, some sugar. Also, with the vanilla, let's just say you're making vanilla, make sure you have enough vanilla flavor. I would actually say to use real vanilla, not imitation vanilla, and also put a little hint of lemon extract in there. That actually kind of just balances the flavor and cuts down on the sweetness of it. So I know a lot of people don't like a really, really sweet icing. So also just try that and let me know how that works out for you. So I hope this was helpful for you, Shani. So again, you're going to add a liquid. I'm recommending add a little bit of heavy cream slowly and keep mixing. Also, make sure you're beating it long enough. I like my icing to be airy. You can mix it for a long time. The texture of it will change. And to incorporate more air, change out your paddle attachment for a whisk attachment towards the end of it. So mix for a while with your paddle attachment, and then I would definitely come in with my whisk attachment, and you'll really see the difference in the air that is incorporated in it, and it should be much better. So I hope that works for you. So let me know. And we have another question from LaShawn Campbell. You can also submit your questions. So if you guys have a question for me, a baking question that you want to be answered, submit to needtoknowpod@gmail.com, or you can go to my social media platforms, Chef Sahira Speaks. Shoot me a DM and I'll be sure to address your question on one of the upcoming episodes. So LaShawn writes this on Facebook. Whenever I bake a pound cake, I take it out of the oven. Some of the brown is off. What am I doing wrong? Thank you for that question, number one. And also, not sure of the brown that you are speaking of. Are you talking about the outside of the cake? Is some of the cake being stuck inside the pan? If that is the case, then maybe you did not spray your pan well enough. Did you spray your pan well enough and flour it well enough? I know they have a baking spray that I guess somehow they have flour in it and you don't need it. I don't trust that because I know if you don't oil and flour your cake, your bundt pan well enough, that it will get stuck. Especially the middle, the I don't know, what do you call that part of the pan? I'm gonna say the middle. The middle part, that dome part of it, that needs to be really oiled well and floured. You can even I rather put more flour than not enough flour and scrape the flour off. You need that cake to pop out. Also, it could be that when you take your cake out, don't let it sit in the pan so long. Like when you take your cake out, let it sit for about 10 minutes. Turn that cake over, right? Because we need to turn that pan over to take it out. Let it sit there for like 5 minutes and the gravity will drop it from there. If your pan is oiled well enough and floured well, that cake should drop out. Cake should definitely drop out. So again, not sure about the brown. What I've actually seen people do is not turn the pound cake over and just use the part when we bake it in the oven and that's their top. That pound cake is supposed to be flipped over. So not sure again about the brown. I'm thinking it's saying that it's maybe stuck in the pan. So I hope this has helped you. If not, reach back out to me and I will try to address that question a little further, or shoot me an email at needtoknowpod@gmail.com shoot me an email at needtoknowpod@gmail.com, and I'll be sure to answer that question. So just to recap, guys, mise en place is a must, right? We will definitely be preparing our ingredients, our utensils, our tools before we start to bake. And you will see that is definitely a game changer. So it does take a few extra steps in the beginning, but it saves you time in the long run. So I highly, highly, highly recommend that you adapt mise en place in the kitchen and maybe in just life, right? Being prepared in life. So I hope you got some insight out of this, guys. Also, if you want to submit a baking question, again, you can submit your baking questions to needtoknowpod@gmail.com, or you can go to my social media platform, Chef Sahira Speaks, and drop me a DM as well. In the next episode, guys, we will discuss how to prepare for the holidays. And again, preparation is part of that. So if you like Need to Know Pod, please consider rating this podcast as well as sharing it, subscribing, for following. Tell everybody you know that they need to know about this podcast. And like always, guys, thanks for listening, and I'll see you in my next episode.
You need to know what to do with that dough. Let the chef show you. You need to know what to do with that dough. Let the chef show you.